Welcome back to Operating Systems Crashcast. I'm Victor, and today we're diving into Section 2.2, User and Operating System Interface. Sheila, why don't you kick us off by explaining what we mean by the user interface in the context of operating systems?
Absolutely, Victor. The user interface is essentially how users interact with the operating system. It's the bridge between the human and the machine. There are two main types of interfaces we'll be discussing today: the command line interface, or CLI, and the graphical user interface, or GUI.
Great introduction, Sheila. Let's start with the CLI. Can you give our listeners a brief explanation of what a command line interface is?
Sure thing. A command line interface is a text-based interface where users interact with the operating system by typing commands. Think of it as a conversation with your computer, where you give it instructions in a specific language it understands. For example, in Windows, you might use the command prompt, while in Unix-based systems like Linux or macOS, you'd use a terminal with shells like Bash.
Excellent explanation. Now let's contrast that with the GUI. How would you describe a graphical user interface to our listeners?
A graphical user interface, or GUI, is what most people are familiar with today. It's a visual way of interacting with the operating system using windows, icons, menus, and a pointer, often referred to as WIMP. Instead of typing commands, users can click on icons, drag and drop files, and navigate through visual representations of the file system. Think of the desktop environment you see when you start up your computer. That's a GUI.
Thanks, Sheila. Now that we've covered the basics, let's dive a bit deeper. Can you talk about the evolution of these interfaces? How did we get from command line to graphical interfaces?
Absolutely, Victor. The CLI was the primary way of interacting with computers for many years. Early operating systems like MS-DOS were entirely command line based. As technology advanced, researchers at Xerox PARC developed the first GUI in the 1970s. This concept was later popularized by Apple with the Macintosh in 1984, and then by Microsoft with Windows.
That's fascinating. It's interesting to note that despite the prevalence of GUIs today, command line interfaces are still widely used, especially by system administrators and developers. Why do you think that is, Sheila?
Great question, Victor. CLIs offer several advantages that make them indispensable for certain tasks. They're typically faster for experienced users, more powerful for complex operations, and can be easily scripted for automation. Additionally, they use fewer system resources, which can be crucial in server environments or when working with remote systems.
Those are excellent points. On the flip side, what would you say are the main advantages of GUIs?
GUIs excel in user-friendliness and intuitiveness. They're much easier for newcomers to understand and use, as they provide visual cues and don't require memorizing commands. GUIs are also great for multitasking, allowing users to have multiple windows open simultaneously. They're particularly useful for tasks that involve visual elements, like graphic design or video editing.
It sounds like both interfaces have their place in modern computing. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about system programs. How do these fit into the user and operating system interface?
System programs are an essential part of the user interface, Victor. They're utility programs that come bundled with the operating system and provide a convenient interface for common tasks. These can include file management tools, status information utilities, programming language support, and program loading and execution functions.
Can you give us some examples of system programs that our listeners might be familiar with?
Certainly. On Windows, you might be familiar with File Explorer for managing files and folders, Task Manager for monitoring system performance, or the Control Panel for system settings. On macOS, you have Finder, Activity Monitor, and System Preferences. These are all examples of system programs that provide a user-friendly interface for interacting with the operating system.
That's really helpful, Sheila. As we wrap up, what would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners about user and operating system interfaces?
Great question, Victor. I'd say the main points to remember are: 1. There are two primary types of interfaces: command line, CLI, and graphical, GUI. 2. CLIs are text-based, powerful, and efficient for experienced users and certain tasks. 3. GUIs are visual, intuitive, and user-friendly. especially for newcomers. 4. Both interfaces coexist in modern operating systems, each with their strengths. 5. System programs are an integral part of the user interface, providing easy access to common system functions. Understanding these concepts is crucial for anyone working with operating systems, whether as a user or a developer.
Excellent summary, Sheila. That brings us to the end of today's episode on user and operating system interface. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. Remember, whether you're typing commands or clicking icons, you're engaging with these interfaces every time you use your computer. Until next time, keep exploring the fascinating world of operating systems.